beautiful rays of one light, and intuitively there's lots of subtleties in all of Yogananda's and Swami's teachings. I definitely found, I don't know if anyone receives them, just emails of daily activities by Yogananda, and today's was the daily meditation for March by Swami Yogananda in the East-West magazine. And it says, "I am God's child. I have nothing to fear except my own wrong actions instigated by my ignorance." I'll say that again. "I am God's child. I have nothing to fear except my own wrong actions instigated by my ignorance." And it's a little bit about it, isn't it? You know, like we're talking about intuition versus reason, and it's not an and or an or. We obviously can do both. And, you know, part of that reading today from the Bible, it shows that Jesus later on used reason and spoke to or spoke in answer to questions within reason, and they were how to go about life and, you know, how to pay taxes and all sorts of things. So you can use both, and what is the difference between both? But before I start and chat into that, I thought I'd share a little dad joke about, I was once a bulldozer operator, but I couldn't cut it or make the grade even when I was doing my level best. So I thought I'd share that with you guys before we get going. Wonderful. And again, just in these intuitively put together affirmations that are quite here, and there's a little subtle word within this affirmation, and it's to do with my will is to do that which is right to do. So it's not necessarily my will. We can direct our will in any direction. And I think that's what this is a part of. And the story of Simon Peter is about that, around that it's understanding that soul connection. And I've done a little drawing for those visuals around it, and coming from that direction. And Jesus was really pleased with his soul perception. Later on, he was displeased with one of the responses that Simon gave, which was he got tied up in the fact that Jesus told him that he was going to be crucified on the cross. And Simon got wound up about that and got very defensive. And Jesus said that it was a satanic pull away from the right direction because he got tied up in the emotion of this worldly activity. So it's a good reminder about the dream state of creation. We're in this dream state, and if we get involved in this dream state rather than being the watcher, that's what Jesus is talking about here, and that's the soul intuition. And I've done this little drawing, I preempted it, of what this means, and I hope that's correct here. So inside of us, we have a soul, and this is what we've all got. This is center everywhere, circumference nowhere. And outside of that, Yogananda described each one of these in a different way. And the mind is the part that looks at, say, a picture or a mirror version of a horse. And then the intellect describes, which is fine. The intellect then sits in and says, yes, that's a horse, and it's in a stable, and it's a brown horse, and goes onto it. And then the next part of our mind goes the ego, and the ego comes in and says, well, that's my horse, and it's in my stable, and starts talking in reference to I and mind. And then the third part, which even at this stage, we're not entwined in it, but it becomes the feeling. That's when we come into it. Oh, that's my horse. I love my horse. I don't know what would happen if I did without. And if we look at the story in relation to how Simon Peter had this soul perception And he came to that conclusion. Later on, he starts integrating these mind, intellect, ego, and feelings. And that's where most of us live in our daily lives. And we can use the mind, we can use the intellect, we can even use the ego. It's that part of the feeling that creates the attachment and the disconnect from all of that. So if we look at it from a daily perspective, and I'll keep referring back to those things, who has had to do something that feels absolutely horrible, but in the end it felt and it brought peace to you? What about who's done something that felt really good, but then brought restlessness and agitation? What about reactions? Who has had someone tell them a hard truth or some news, and our reaction was restless and agitated and anger? Who's actually had someone tell us something really hard, but it's actually, again, brought us peace? In the end, we've recognized that that truth brought us peace. And it's kind of that reaction process, or that part of us that takes it on board. We often, I love the Davies description of being in a community of like-minded people, that where these rough rocks that are slowly being rounded and grounded to a beautiful soft pebble. We can't do that without hard truths. We need that rough and tumbling to do that. And when we look back at this part of it, we can start relating, can't we, to, well, where are we reacting to either giving that news? Are we making decisions up in this top part? Are we making these decisions based on feelings or from the ego and the intellect and mind, without and completely ignoring this soul center, this soul part? And this is what this intuition's all about. This area up the top, the black and the blues and the reds and the green, are where our dream state is. Those parts of us are where we're very busy, isn't it? You think about being caught up in those in the life of all those reactions. You think of everything that we do. If those processes are going on, we're going to be really busy. Busy minds. And the more busy we get with our life, and the more busy we get in everything that we do, the more that we're ignoring that soul center, we're moving further and further away from it. And those decisions then become based around this. Often, when it's to do with work, relationships, or anything, it's those parts that are arguing. And the other part of that is each one of those has a different vibration. So every time we move away from ego, that vibration becomes different. So even if we're responding from our soul center, sometimes people won't listen if their vibration's completely different and they're in those ego parts. So being aware of it is allowing us to have peace in our decisions. That's why those questions were really pertinent, because if we're in that soul center, we're in that perception of the soul. Because if you think about the soul, it's really just Christ, which is very simple things. It's love, light, joy, peace, power also. So we can do things from power, and wisdom. Everything, if you think of how everything else is developed, there's hundreds of thousands of different things that are going to be busy giving us reactions and place. So that's the difference. If we can sit still enough and quiet that busyness, quieten those when we're trying to make decisions, or quieten those as we go along. And if you've been meditating for quite some time, which is the goal of that, is to come back into it, you'll probably know that you'll start having intuition. You could be born with parts of it that comes to do with karma and where you are in this cycle and moving along. But ultimately, it's about being quiet enough. And it's often, we'll all talk about it, where somebody crossed your mind and then you give them a call and it's like, oh, there couldn't be a better time for that call. Or often we'll read something or listen to a piece of music, and Kalamali's amazing at it. She'll pick a tune or a piece of music, and next thing you know, it's like right on track with the day's lessons or what actually happens. So that also comes into play of where you sit and how you go about it. And I think as we go into it, really it comes back to the basis of yoga, which the second yoga sutra, which is yoga chitti vritti nirodha, meaning yoga is the cessation of fluctuation of the mind and feeling. And that is the vortices, those outward vortices of feeling that are actually attaching and bringing over lifetimes every time we come in. These are the vrittis that we create when we're living in this world that keep us attached to this delusion. And the goal of yoga, the goal of meditation, the goal of all the Patanjali sutras are to get rid of this and return back to being the soul. Thank you.
I'm going to take this lovely chart.
Can I hold it for you?
No, it's okay. I just want to share that one of the ways Swamiji would explain crystal clarity was the calmness of the ripples. Look how this looks like when you drop the pebble in and the pond, and we talk about how the ripples spread out from that. So that pebble in the pond is our thoughts that are restless, our habits that bring us restlessness. And in the teachings of spirituality, we talk about stilling the ripples, so that, what they say is it's a beautiful, crystal clear reflection of the above. So if the pond and the lake is still, for example, in an evening sky, you could perfectly see the reflection of the moon. And intuition comes from the soul perception, yes, but it is connected to spirit. So if you think about when humanity is all acting from the soul, we're all attuned with spirit. Now, a funny thing about living in community, yay, is that when everyone is trying to experience an intuitive perception, what happens is eventually those ripples quiet because people will meditate on an issue, or they'll come together and pray. All of those acts, even chanting or music, help to still those little ripples that take us outward into maybe an ego thought or a feeling reactive thought or a intellectual or a mind chatter. And with that, we get farther and farther, those ripples get bigger and more extended out. But if we can come back in, what happens when a community of people is trying to listen to the soul? Randomly, the meeting will end on the perfect note. Randomly, everyone's conflict will resolve. But it's because they've stilled the ripples and they're connecting to spirit, which has a plan. So a lot of times yogis will come together to make tough decisions, and everyone's coming in from a different ripple. But what will happen is they come to a solution that was spirit. It was spirit's guidance and spirit's. That's why those prayers for this week are, I will act. But guide thou my reason, will, and activity to the right thing in everything I do. And then we also know that phrase, as within, so without. That's a very yogic truth, because what you start to notice is that intuitively, you will see that the lessons that we're learning, you're learning, people in your daily life, it's a reflection of the inner world and the lessons that they're there to work through. And so when we apply our willpower to God's will, we're going to experience more opportunities to have that stillness of heart. Because even like you said, which those were great introspection questions, which maybe you could write down for everyone later. I made a hard decision. Did that make me feel good? Yes, I was at peace. I made a decision I thought was lovely, or I reacted in a way I thought was great at the time. But then later, does it is it something that keeps bothering you, or does it, give you restlessness when you think about it? And those are the things that then you can say, maybe I can look at this from a different perspective. And then the other thing is our meditation techniques. So when we just practice Hong Sa, when we practice energization and we relax and feel in energization, and when we practice Kriya, for those who have Kriya, even if you have Om technique, the idea is the more you sit in the stillness where your soul is communing and listening and loving. Love actually can really help. Pure love, stills the heart. Bliss is stillness of the heart, complete stillness. And then you'll start to have, the more you listen, the more you develop your intuition. That's why we're meant to sit in the stillness and not have any thoughts. Why is that? Because our ripples are settling, there's my hand, settling until there is nothing but pure stillness and reflection of spirit. And that is our goal, because we want to be like yoga is union. These teachings from the great ones are on how to live from the soul. And there was a reading for today's preparation where it said, if you continue to live from the soul, you will be united with God. It is the way. The more you can act with will, reason, activity guided by spirit, the more you will be free. What a wonderful and encouraging truth to be able to bring into our day, into our week. And I can see Nara's got his pen out. Let us see what Nara might add.
I just wanted to add that the soul is the church that Jesus was talking about, and that's the church.
Oh, you have a mic.
Yeah, but you can pass it. Yeah.
We did circle time yesterday, so
yeah,
we're
absolutely.
in that house.
That soul is the church that Jesus was talking about. That's the rock. The rock is the foundation of the church is built on that soul principle. So it's that stillness that you were talking about.
And we have 2 songs, and actually 1 song and 1 poem put to music. We're going to end